Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live from Film Fanatic. This is, well, now that I think of it, it's the first show of the new year. It's, yeah, the first Film Fanatic show for 2024. So hope everyone's doing good. It's, uh, it's been a wild year, that's for sure. But good, but good. You know, when you reflect back in hindsight and some things that have happened, and given the craziness of the everyday world and our existence. So there's, I guess, a bunch of movies coming out. Well, there's always a lot of movies coming out. Usually, typically, a lot of studios put out movies that they don't always have a lot of faith in as far as box office draws, like in January and February. But I've also seen some really good movies in January and February. I remember seeing John Wick Chapter 4, which was an awesome movie from about almost 2 years ago. Uh, Arguably the best in the franchise, just as good as the first one, if not better. Um, and I've been watching and checking out new movies to look forward to this year, 2025. It's hard to believe. But in all honesty, there's only I don't know, there's not a whole lot. There are, and I have been checking out some lists of films that are coming out, and I don't really watch a lot of trailers. The problem that I have with trailers is it's two things. Usually, most of the time, is that most trailers these days show too much, and you almost don't need to see the movie. It's almost like you know, it's like a recap or a synopsis, but a complete version to where you see and you can totally have an understanding as to the how the movie starts, what it's about, and how it ends. A lot of trailers do a terrible injustice or just totally have this commit, I don't know, a form of treason just because how they, you there's no it goes beyond just piquing your curiosity. They kind of answer the questions. They give questions. They provide something that looks interesting, but then they give you the answers in a lot of these trailers. And it's a really dumb marketing thing. And I've seen people talk about where there a lot of these, and this is usually the case with bigger studios, but a lot of the times they're doing that to, because it's hard for obvious reasons to get people into the theater, to kind of bring it back after it being on the whole movie going experience basically being on the brink of extinction. So bringing it back after these last 4 to 5 years slowly. So they have this. I think a lot of studios have this mindset of doing whatever they can, including showing the complete story in their trailers, and it's just that's a new thing. Trailers have gotten a lot worse. The last two trailers that I remember seeing that were really great. There was the trailer for Maxine, which was the conclusion for the amazing trilogy by Ty West. That was a fabulous trailer. It really piqued my interest. And when I actually saw the movie, I was really surprised. I still it just piqued my interest, and it gave you, some kernels of what was going to happen, but it enticed your imagination, and it made me excited like a trailer should. That's the job of a trailer. Piquing your interest really, and that was really effective. And then also the trailer for Romulus, Alien Romulus, was actually very good. in that regard because it did pique your interest, even though that movie was a total disappointment and definitely the biggest disappointment of the year, aside from Joker 2, which was, I really think like both of those movies are really bad. But I think Alien Romulus, both very, very bad movies and terrible experiences. But, this Joker 2, after seeing Joker 2, which I just reviewed a couple of weeks ago, which is just an horrendous train wreck of a film. Alien Romulus, as much as I dislike that movie, Joker made that look like, um, you know, look like The Godfather in comparison. I mean, which is my all-time favorite movie. But anyway, those trailers were for Romulus were very good because were very enticing. And before I saw the trailer, I was not interested. Then I saw the trailer, and then I was very interested. And it didn't turn out very well. But the biggest and the best trailer I've seen, and in the ultimate payoff for me was for this year of 2024 was Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Trailer was just beautiful, exciting, thrilling, and it just drew me in. I was excited when I heard about that film, but when I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, this is probably my most anticipated movie of 2024. And it did not disappoint. I saw that and I was just kind of enamored with that film. So, yeah, it was just a thrilling experience. So, today's show is going to be on, well, it's going to be about Nosferatu again. This is, I think, about the third or fourth show I've done on Nosferatu. I did a couple of shows on my anticipation for the film. I also have talked a lot about Robert Eggers, who is, I think one of the best directors around right now. I love all of his films, and I own. Unfortunately, I only own. I mean, he's a very, very much a visual director, a visual storyteller. I only own The Witch on Blu-ray, unfortunately, but I do need to get the rest of his films on Blu-ray because it really is the true definition of immersion in film, and he really is like the epitome of an artist, I feel. So, and of course, The Witch, amazing film, a movie that just gets better and better, and then other amazing films like The Lighthouse, just incredible film. The Northman, fantastic film, and of course Nosferatu. 4 films under his belt, each film definitely in the horror genre, with the exception of The Northman. And, I think there's a lot of different elements in The Lighthouse that it's I think it's a horror film. I definitely label that as a horror film, but I feel like it's a little bit outside the box. It might be, to a degree, a narrow label for that film because I think it's a little bit more than that. But it is, and I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. And of course, Nosferatu being just classic gothic horror. And so I've done a show. I did 1 or 2 shows on my anticipation for Nosferatu, and then I did a big show on seeing the film and my whole experience, and that was just fabulous. So today's show is going to be about the all of the. It seems like there's this mountain of divisiveness around this film, Nosferatu, and also really around most of his films. I'm going to mostly talk about kind of what I see and maybe my opinions around that, around particularly around Nosferatu. I'm going to get a little bit into, the work of Robert Eggers, who I love, and I think he's like one of the best directors right now. One of my favorites, and has been. His films, I feel, just grow on me more and more. Also, even like with The Witch, I thought it was good when I first saw it, and it's grown on on me so much. Each time I just kind of fall in love with that movie more and more. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. But he's always had a little bit of this like a polarity, a divisiveness around his films and people's reactions. But Nosferatu is kind of unprecedented. The amount of all around negative press that the movie's been getting, and it's really strange. Even by people who, I mean, yeah, there are people out there who feel the same way I do, but I've seen also people who say it's a great film and do recommend it. People, YouTubers, people who are doing the same crazy thing that I do, people who have really big audiences that make their living off of it, and then just everyday Joe schmoes chiming out on Facebook or wherever about the movie, and a lot of time being spent talking about this movie. But so, but I keep seeing it all the time. So I wanted to kind of like talk about that and maybe some theories behind it or whatnot. The first thing, I mean, it's a different thing. The tone of it is different, but I feel like there's a lot of parallels or similarities between Nosferatu and, it might sound strange, but the the last of the last Halloween film, Halloween Ends, as far as the negative reviews about the film, like people who don't like the film really really shit on it. I mean, to no end. Overall, like, I think there's more positive reviews for Nosferatu, but highly critical. The people that don't like it spend days trashing this movie to the point of where it's like what's going on here? And then you have people like me that are really, saying and championing this film, and but trying to be like, even that, even though I'm very enthusiastic about this film, trying to be, kind of sensible and realistic about it. So it's a wild thing, because what I've been seeing is that people have been, constantly nitpicking this film to the point of where I don't know what's going on. And sometimes I think one thing that comes to mind is, or, at the end of the day, it's just a movie. It's just a movie. And the amount of time that I've seen people talk about this film in a negative light, I'm like, my first reaction is like, okay, come on. Come on, folks. Ease up a little bit and get a life. And I'm glad you have all this time in the world to just crap on a movie where you're spending hours commenting on the movie and nitpicking every conceivable detail of this movie, saying this and that. Um, and it's like, for me, obviously, movies are very important. I love movies to death, and I can spend hours talking about movies, but this is different. This is like a different way of going about it that I just feel is like just really strange to me in a lot of ways. And I've seen people say, well, his work is, Robert Eggers' films are so divisive and this and that. And he obviously is very successful. Nosferatu, he's still an independent filmmaker, but he's been able to carve out this really, in the last 8 to 10 years or whatnot, he's really been able to carve out this really cool niche. He's got a good fan base, very successful. Each film seems to make more money for him, and he works in comparison to, say, budgets for big studios. He does not use a lot of money. And so it's, he really maximizes whatever every dollar he has for the big screen. I do think that, Nosferatu is the most successful movie of his career. It's already made, I think, it made its money back already the first weekend, and it's already, now it's still making a lot of money, but it's gravy now. It's already been very successful. It's the biggest film, commercially, for, as far as box office, in terms of box office, for Robert Eggers, out of all of his films. It's been a huge hit. And I'm glad to see that, because, the film is not, it really isn't. None of its films are for, really, quote unquote commercial consumption. They're not your everyday film. It's not, whenever you see a Robert Eggers film, it's not going to be your everyday experience. I think he definitely is a fiercely independent creative force, and he has a lot of integrity. He believes in what he does, and you see it in spades in his craft, and you see it in the amount of detail that he invests in every facet of the movie. And a lot of his films are, well, I think all of his films, they have, even with Nosferatu, which is essentially the only film he's done in his career that is essentially a remake of Dracula, that has been told countless times in so many different ways, and we all know the story. Well, we should, at least the true source material, Bram Stoker's Dracula. But that story has been told, a million times, or has influenced other films, and there's been, all these hybrid or weird variations of it. But it's basically a reimagining of a classic, gothic fairy tale. It's basically what it is, and it's the only time he's really done that in his career. And so, but that being said, even though it's got this level of familiarity, because of that, he does it in his own way. It's truly his own vision, and it's a really unique experience. And it's not any more commercial than any of his other films. It's all of his films, I feel, are very dense. There's a lot of layers. I think all of his films are more or less slow burns. They are also, I think of his films as being like onions, where you're just peeling back different layers, and there's a lot of symbolism, there's a lot of metaphor, but I think there's a certain kind of richness and depth to all of his films that, you know, you can see his films numerous times, and I think you really can get something a little bit different each time, because the water is deep, in his films. There's a lot of texture. There's a lot of layers, and there's a lot, just how he will attack or show a character on the big screen. There's all of his characters seem to always have some kind of multifaceted thing that they're bringing to the screen, and they're complex. So you couple that with the story, there's a lot to his. For me, it's like his films are like reading classic literature, really good, well polished. It's stories that you can always go back to, and they're rich, and there's always something new to kind of get out of it. That's at least how it's been for me, and all of his films that I've seen, each time I've rewatched them, I have gotten that experience, especially around The Witch. I mean, that unfortunately is the only movie that I own on Blu-ray, but that movie's grown on me so much. And I'm just like kind of amazed at like the seriousness that people take it in one regard, because I feel like people are forgetting that it's just a movie. And so I don't understand what it is. And sometimes I've especially around Nosferatu, there has been this angle that people have said that, well, the reason that this movie has really, I don't know, affected people or caused these really negative opinions or, all of this negative feedback to a degree of a film, people that are not on the train of Robert Eggers, it's because people are so used to the big dumb superhero movie or movies that just come out all the time, and they're used they want things fast. They want a McDonald's cheeseburger, and that people are essentially just have no attention anymore. And I mean, I think that's true. But I also feel that is, I don't know. I think that's true to an extent, but I think that's maybe a little bit too much of a generalization. I don't know, because I think what happens most of the time is that these, generally, and I think it happens with corporations. That's one of the worst parts of capitalism is that, I mean, of course, when a corporation is conceived and put together, the bottom line, the only agenda is to make a profit, and that's it, and sustainability. But I think a lot of the times, in regards to the corporation or the corporate mentality of the studios, film studios, especially the bigger studios, I generally think they perceive the audience as more or less being idiots, and that they do want the same rehashed crap all the time. And I also feel that that happens in the music industry too. I think there's this corporate mentality of where things need to be played somewhat safe, and that people are goldfish in a fishbowl, and they have no attention span, and they just kind of want the same regurgitated idea. So let's play things safe, make a shit ton of money, and move on to the next thing, because they'll forget about this particular product in a couple weeks, and it will just make another one. I do think that that's a big problem, and I wish so. For me, someone like Robert Eggers who does not do that, I feel like it's such a breath of fresh air. To have somebody who is a visionary and is truly talented and works outside of that system, but yet he is a part of that system, especially now. But I feel he's able to navigate through that and keep his integrity and his skills intact. And I think that's really inspiring. And I do feel like all of his films, Nosferatu, like they require patience. They do require people to sit and invest some time. You're not going to watch Nosferatu and get up and, if you get up, I feel, even though, like, for instance, like I said, this movie is a story. Nosferatu is a story. Dracula, it's essentially, I mean, it is a remake of the original silent film. But for me, I was surprised by. To me, it was the story is the same, but I felt it was it took from other resources and other sources that I really appreciated, and that I was surprised by. The main two the main things were, I thought, yes, it's been a while since I've seen the original silent film, but an iconic film. It is a classic. It's probably been about 10 or 12 years since I've seen it, but I have seen it a bunch of times. And I think, it's definitely a retelling of that story. But for me, I saw a big influence on from in this film from Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I think up until this point is the definitive version of this classic story. I thought there was a lot of influence from that, which I thought was really cool. And I also thought it took a lot more influence from the original source material, Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I thought that was cool. It was a little bit more of an epic tale, and it was more it was a it was the influences were farther reaching, and I like that it pulled elements from those different things. And it was very much like it has this very folkloric feel to it, which I loved. The new Nosferatu, I liked it. Got more into the folkloric aspect. It tied a little bit into the idea of the occult, and also Dracula not being or Nosferatu or Count Orlok as not really being. I feel like this movie really dived into this idea more of where Dracula isn't really a character per se. He's more of a force of nature, and you just kind of feel his presence. That's one of the things that I loved about this movie. Is I mean, when he is on screen with Bill Skarsgård, who's just tremendous. I mean, tremendous, and it's incredible. And you kind of can't. I found myself not wanting those scenes to end because the dialogue was so rich. It's the I could feel when Count Orlok was not in the scenes. I could feel his presence in the movie throughout, like that sense of doom, and I thought that was so effective. So I really thought one of the things is they really treated the vampire idea, Dracula, Count Orlok, Nosferatu. You really get a sense that he is this, like, he's much more of this force of nature, and I thought that was super cool and really effective. But the thing that I'm just astounded by, as far as the negative things go, is like I don't get it why people are nitpicking it to the degree that they do. And I don't know if it's because people just don't have patience, or people are more jaded than they've ever been. I think I mean, and again, I I am not hating on people or criticizing people because they don't share my opinion. I don't want to live in a world where everybody shares my opinion. I love that everybody has, to a degree, hopefully, an independent thought about what their experiences is or what their opinions are. I love diversity of opinions. But this to me is a little bit different. This is like to the point of it really caused me after I've come across lots of talk about this movie and people who are really spending an ungodly amount of time trashing this movie. It just my first reaction when I see it, because of where it's gone and like at the level that it's gone to, my first thing is really like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck is wrong with people? And I think it's like, it's complicated, but I think it's, people are maybe taking it too serious. They're looking at it in too much of a serious light. Um, and I think it's complicated as to why that is a thing. I do think people, I think it's an attention span thing. I think it is a long movie. It is a slow burn. It's very dialogue driven in a lot of ways. There is action, and then there are the scares and the thrills that you kind of expect for a horror film, especially for a vampire movie. But it's a slow burn, and that's not anything different, you know, for any of his other films. But I do feel like people's attention spans are different, and I don't get that. I don't know what they were expecting to the point of how they're attacking this movie. And I feel like people who love um, the original, one of the big things I hear is to people that regard certain films, especially, well, the original silent film, people who regard that, and then also Werner Herzog's Nosferatu with Klaus Kinski, which is a great movie. But I kind of feel like that movie is a little bit overrated because it's great. And again, it's just my opinion. I think the music for Werner Herzog's film is amazing. Klaus Kinski's amazing, but the actual film and the dialogue is not really good. It's kind of goofy and silly, but not in the best way, and it's really clunky. And I think it's kind of dated. But yet people like have the biggest boner or up for that movie. They put that. I think they put that movie on such a high pedestal. But when you actually watch the movie, it's a little bit silly and goofy. I do think it's a classic. I do love that movie. There's so many amazing, iconic scenes in that film, and the score is just incredible. But I think people put that film in a little bit. They prop that film up a little too high. But what I see is that there are these folks out there that regard those movies as just being such classics, and where they just worship these movies, that there's a line drawn in the sand, and those two films are like sacred ground, sacred text, and don't fuck with it. This is where the buck stops, and they draw a line in the sand about it, and it's a little bit like, I don't know, gatekeeping, or just, it's a little bit like immature. Like, things that I love, I don't even, you know, like, I'm not gonna get into a fight or an argument defending the movie because I believe in the movie so much. Like, it's kind of like ridiculous. Like, recently I just did a show on a movie that I feel, is probably overall for me, I think the greatest horror film ever made. I last weekend I was out at a gig, and a friend who was at the show, we ended up talking about movies, and during the conversation he had said to me, "What's your, you know," he just asked me directly, "What do you think is the best horror movie ever made?" And a lot of times that's kind of, more or less an impossible question to answer. But it took me 2 minutes or a minute, and I was like, that's a really good question, and there's so many. But I think overall, probably for me, the best horror film ever made is Lucio Fulci's The Beyond from 1981. I just think that movie is just a masterpiece in every way. It's got the classic macabre aesthetic. It's a gothic horror film. It's it's got some of the most amazing practical effects, some of the most amazing kills in a movie I've ever seen. It's very surrealistic. Also, it's kind of this little bit of this like fever dream, but it's also just full on horror, and it's just got incredible atmosphere. It's got one of the best introductions to a film and one of the best conclusions to a film. And overall, like, as many horror, as big of a fan as I am of horror films, I feel like that to me is could be the definitive one, or is. But I'm not gonna like act as like, an armed soldier protecting the movie, because I realize I I'm probably a little bit in the minority about with that opinion, but in my own terms, I regard that movie at such a high level, and I just love that movie. I just watched it again the other night. But I'm not gonna act like I'm a soldier at battle to protect the movie, and to like draw a sword in defending it. Like, it's just a little bit ridiculous because it's a movie. And the other thing is, I noticed when I was talking about that movie, The Beyond, and I said that, the friends I was talking to, and there was a little group of us. No, none of them had even heard of the movie, and nobody knew who Lucio Fulci was. And I'm like, what? But it is what it is. There's a lot of media. There's a lot of things to check out there. So I think there's that. But I think people's attention spans, I think they are. I think there is this thing. I think people have less attention to a degree. I think people get too serious, and can't like let things go or have an ease with certain subjects. Um, and I feel like you can analyze things to death, but I think when you have an experience with art, I feel it's like it's a you're gonna it's an experience with your for your mind and body. It's how you're gonna react. And of course, it's very possible for people to. It's great to take a deep dive and really analyze something and say you see that great painting or you see that amazing. You go to this amazing concert or you see this amazing film. You see this you go to this incredible theater show and you take that deep dive and analyze like why you think it works and why you think it didn't work. But at the same time, it's entertainment, and you have to have a little bit of an easiness and a little bit of taking it with a grain of sand or salt of like, well, no, it's entertainment. I can't take it that seriously. While even if you do take that incredible deep dive and to be very analytical. And I think what happens is that people can be so analytical where they can read into things that aren't necessarily there and kind of get up their own ass. So I think that happens. So and it's kind of an unprecedented thing that I've seen. I don't understand the the level that it's gone to. So I just wanted to make a quick show in regards to looking at this situation. So thanks again and happy new year and we will see you sometime soon. Peace.